Hi everyone! Today's video will be a review of I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, a YA contemporary by Erika Sanchez, which was a finalist for the National Book Award in 2018 and was on numerous best of lists for that year. The story centers around Julia, the teenage daughter of undocumented Mexican immigrants living in Chicago. Their life is quite difficult. They live in a dangerous neighborhood. Julia's mother is a house cleaner. Her father works at a candy factory, so they don't really have a lot of money. Julia is very rebellious. She's bookish. She likes art. She has dreams of moving to New York and becoming a writer, but her parents keep pressuring her to just stay home, learn how to cook and clean and take care of them, and just be a good daughter. Frustratingly for Julia, she is constantly being compared to her older sister, Olga, who doesn't really have any ambitions of her own. She works a part-time job and she just stays at home and helps her parents. One day, Olga dies in a car accident. Julia feels like some of the details around Olga's death are unusual, so she decides to investigate. Along the course of her investigation, she meets and has a relationship with a young boy named Connor, and she also learns things about her family that makes her see them in a new light. I read this book in April as part of Book Roast's Owl Magical Readathon. This gave me an owl in Muggle Studies. The challenge was read a contemporary, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was a nice, fun, quick read, but it just didn't really wow me. It wasn't bad, it just didn't really make that much of an impact on me. The one thing I liked most about this book was the writing style. Erika Sanchez has a background in poetry, and it definitely shows in the way this book is written. I'm just going to read you the first paragraph. What surprised me most about seeing my sister dead is the lingering smirk on her face. Her pale lips are turned up ever so slightly, and someone has filled in her patchy eyebrows with a black pencil. The top half of her face is angry, like she's ready to stab someone, and the bottom half is almost smug. This is not the Olga I knew. Olga was as meek and fragile as a baby bird. That's an amazing first paragraph. It's really beautiful. Like I just said, Sanchez has a background in poetry, and this shows. But it's also her first novel ever, and that shows too. The plot of this novel is very loose, and there's not always an organic sense of flow from one part of the story to the next. A few weeks ago, I watched Chris Stuckman's review of Quentin Tarantino's most recent movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, wherein he says that audiences today take for granted the idea that for a story to work, each scene has to perfectly flow and fit into the next one. The scene you're watching has to come as a direct result of something that happened in the scene before it, and Quentin Tarantino proves that that doesn't necessarily need to be true. But the thing with Quentin Tarantino movies is, and the way he writes, is that there's always like some vein running through the various parts of his story. There's some logic, I've heard some people call it like divine intervention or whatever. Like, this book doesn't really have that. The plot of this feels very sloppy. You just get dropped into scenes without any, with very little exposition as to how we got there, and there's also, you don't always get a clear sense of how much time has passed between the scene you're reading and the one that preceded it. Based on the blurb, and the cover of this, I thought this was going to be primarily about Julia uncovering the truth about Olga's death, and of course that's in here, but there are long stretches, where you're reading where that's just kind of pushed into the background. I thought Connor, the boy Julia has a relationship with, was going to contribute significantly to her character arc, but we really only see him for a few chapters in the middle and then briefly at the end. He's such a non-entity, so inconsequential to most of what happens in this book that, he could have been cut out completely and the novel would have been pretty much exactly the same. You could say that this is supposed to be a character study and it's all about the protagonist's journey, but Julia just isn't that interesting as a protagonist. She's not unlikable, but she's kind of pretentious and annoying. She spends a lot of time talking about food or, food she likes, or waxing about how, oh, I like to read Albert Camus for fun, and, all my friends like hip-hop, but I like new wave, and blah, 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 blah. I'm not saying that I wanted her to be a stereotype, but, I think she would have been a much more interesting, complex character if we had seen her having some internal struggle over wanting to be true to herself while also feeling like an outsider, feeling removed from her family and her community. Julia goes through struggles, throughout the plot, and those struggles do make her feel sympathetic to the reader, and she learns things that help her grow as a character, but she's just so, irritating that didn't have much of an impact on me. I feel like this book kind of doesn't know what it wants to be. It's a little bit of a character study. It's a little bit of a coming-of-age story, a slice-of-life story. It's kind of a mystery, kind of a romance, but it couldn't commit to being any one of those things. It's just kind of underwhelming. I mean, it's a nice, like I said, it's a nice, quick, easy read, but it's just not anything that'll make you, it's not life-changing. It doesn't really make you think. There is one area that, that I feel this novel succeeded in, which is that it does foster sympathy for and empathy for undocumented immigrants, which I feel is very relevant to what's going on now. I honestly don't really know what we should do about this problem, but I think the people like Julia's parents, they are human beings, and you need to remember that. You hear about the things that have been going on at these detention facilities, concentration camps. That's really what they are. These people aren't being allowed medical care, they're not being allowed to shower, they're being forced to drink out of toilets, and it's just horrible. And people who are in favor of this are saying, oh, well, we're just enforcing the law. And that may be, but it's possible to enforce the law without violating someone's human rights. If you don't think people should be allowed into your country without documentation, without going through the proper legal process, then that's one thing. That doesn't mean you get to be indifferent to their basic rights being violated. There's one part of this novel where Julia goes to Mexico to visit some of her family, and she sees the people in this town she's visiting being shaken down for protection money from the cartels. And that's part of this debate we're having. I mean, it's a debate, it's something people aren't talking about. One of the reasons you have this wave of migrants, refugees coming here is because, the United States, our drug enforcement policy has allowed these cartels to become super powerful, that they can just exact their will over the people in their countries. They can essentially establish dictatorships, and that's something we've caused, and we've been fighting a war on drugs for 40 years, and the problem's only getting worse, and we've contributed to this. We have our policies, like, economic sanctions on countries like Venezuela. We've been overthrowing governments in South America. We've been destabilizing that region for years. That's why these people are coming here, and we just don't feel any moral obligation to help them. So that's my take on this, is that, okay, if we're not going to let them into our country, then we should stop making their country so dangerous. We should stop exploiting them, and we need to accept our responsibility in this. And that's so that's one thing that this book did well, which is, it made me think about that. So that is my review of I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erika L. Sanchez. Again, 3 stars. Didn't love it, didn't hate it. It's not terrible, it's not great. If you're curious about this book, go ahead and read it. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. I'm Jacob. Bye.